Hello and welcome to another Beyond Sunday podcast. I am Peter Bay, hosting today with Dr. Tim Riley on a parenting podcast, continuing in the Broccoli series. We are on currently part 426. B. Yeah, BA. Check the show notes, and but the conversation is being continued. If this is your first time listening to this parenting podcast, go back, start at the beginning, and get the framework, get the bedrock to get you up to this point. If you have been with us all the way through, this is wonderful, and I'm so glad you're with us today. So last episode, we left off singing the theme to Wizard of Oz. Well, not the theme, but one of the songs. Dr. Tim Riley admitted his favorite character is the Scarecrow, which is baffling to me because he has so many brains. I said my favorite character is the Cowardly Lion, to which he agreed immediately. And but the difference between Oz and Kansas is what got us there. Remind us of that, and then we'll keep galloping forward.
So very quickly, it works best to teach if you have clear differences between what a child's life is like, whether they are or are not meeting expectations. The bigger that difference is, the faster they will learn. And then if we deliver those differences in a reliable way, so much the better. So we use the example of the Wizard of Oz, where if your life is, if you're meeting expectations, taking care of your chores, following rules, I'm going to do everything I can to make your life Oz-like, fun and interesting and enjoyable and full of music and happy people and probably not that many munchkins, but otherwise a lot like Oz.
Yeah.
But as soon as you fail to meet my expectations, Kansas.
Back to Kansas.
Dull, black and white, boring, flat Kansas, right? The bigger that difference is, the easier it is for your child to tell whether or not they're meeting your expectations.
Very good. And so Oz and Kansas, make it so clear for that kid. Reward them, cheer them on when they do it well, and when they don't, be like gravity. Gravity doesn't argue with you. If you jump off the playset, you fall down. And if you do it 10 times, you'll fall down every time. It's consistent. So there's a lot of repetition with that. So that gets us into levels of consequences.
Yeah, and actually falling off a piece of playground equipment is a good example of the first kind of consequence, which is a natural consequence. And these are the things that happen where the parent doesn't need to have any involvement at all. And they're the best for teaching because they're the most real world. And then most adult-like, the most what we experience. So, in a negative direction, that might be you ride your bike too fast, you fall, you get a skinned knee. Parent doesn't have to be involved in that, and there's an important lesson to be earned in that. Something happens at school, you get in trouble, you stay after school. That's not my problem. That's your problem. It's something that you have created. So when you can see those kinds of consequences coming, and you recognize that it might be painful but not harmful to the child, let it happen. Don't get in the way of that. Let them experience that. That's a powerful learning experience. The other side, the positive side of things might be that, studying harder earns good grades. Parent doesn't have to be involved in that. For me, eating fewer donuts means I get to move my belt in a notch. That's a nice positive consequence. It takes a little longer, but and anytime those things do happen for kids, then you increase the value of them by adding your praise on top of them. So, hey, great job at school, or great job leaving the donuts alone.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. The consequences can be positive or negative. When a kid does what they're supposed to be doing, and natural consequences, they get a reward, and it becomes more self-motivation. It's not always extrinsic. They get to feel that feeling of I've achieved some pride, and that's really important.
I mean, we start with the idea that the main positive consequences kids have is all of the privileges they have every day. And if you think about the difference between, what's a right, I guess, and what's a privilege, I have a pretty narrow definition of what rights are for kids. I mean, I think they have a right to your absolutely unqualified affection. And they have a right to your protection. They have a right to warm place to sleep, nutritious food, appropriate clothing. That's it.
Oh, wow.
Everything else is a privilege. And by the way, nobody gives you any of those things, right? As an adult, you have to earn those things. So kids are already ahead of the game by having a warm place to sleep, nutritious food, and appropriate clothing, and your unbiased and unqualified affection.
So their smartphone is not a right.
Their smartphone is not a right.
Wi-Fi is not a right.
Wi-Fi, television, playing outside, riding your bike, a snack after dinner. None of those things are rights. But if they get used to those things and begin to treat them that way, then it gets harder to manage.
I wonder if that, on another level, contentment and discontentment, when you start to just get things because you get things and I should get things, that probably leads to a awful lack of contentment.
Yeah, if you have a sense of entitlement toward everything and there's really no upper limit of the number of things or amount of things that you can have, then the pattern that tends to emerge is you get brief gratification, but no satisfaction.
Yeah, no fulfillment.
I got that. Now what's next? What's next? What's next?
I don't mean to bring us too far off the path, but I do think that this can be the misinterpretation often of the American dream, which is a vague thing anyway. But that thought of like, if I want it, it's mine. I can get it. All I have to do is claim it. Then it's mine. And I do feel as I look around, I remember it was years ago, we had just had a house fire, and a few days later, I go to basketball and I'm playing basketball and I'm like, hey, they're like, we haven't seen you in a week. What's going on? And I'm like, oh, we actually had a house fire. It's wild. And one of the guys goes, are you going to tell your kids? And I said, time out, what? He said, are you going to tell your kids that you had a house fire? I said, well, my 3-year-old saw it, so he knows. The 1-year-old, I'm not sure that she knows, but absolutely. I said, actually, the next day I brought them to the house so they could see why they don't have their toys in their bed. And it's going to be a long time. And he said, I would never do that. I would just tell them that we're taking a break from our house a little bit. He said, I want to give my kids, yes, I want to give my kids everything I never had. And I've heard that phrase before. And at the heart of it is something good of like, bless our kids. But the difference that I'm hearing from you is blessing between stuff or blessing with affection.
Yeah, they're already blessed by having those things that I've talked about, right? The other things are trappings and traps, I guess, in a way.
Wow, yeah.
As well. The more stuff you get, the more stuff you have to keep track of and maintain and all those kind of things. And the more, and the, back up for a second. I mean, I think the easiest way to say it is I have met lots of kids at my clinic who know the value of the cost of lots of things, but the value of nothing. They don't value it because there's nothing of themselves invested in it.
Wow, that'll preach. Some pastor just wrote that down. They know the cost, but the value of nothing.
I stole it.
Oh my goodness. Get it, Steve Furtick. You got that one. All right. I brought us off the path. Bring us back onto the path.
Okay, so we've been talking about consequences here. We have established a contract with our kids.
Okay.
Here's what I need from you. Here's what you can expect from me if you do or do not meet those expectations. Things go well, Oz. Things go badly, Kansas. And the way Kansas or any consequence accumulates is at 3 different levels. We talked about a natural consequence: ride your bike too fast, fall down, skin your knee. That's not always available. If it is available as a parent, you let it happen. Get out of the way. Don't try to interfere with that. Don't be the parent who goes to school and argues with the teacher about some consequence that they've given their kid. I've seen this all the way from parents arguing with other parents or with teachers, all the way to parents in a courtroom arguing for a kid and trying to get them out of some justly deserved consequence. And what tends to happen if kids get out of those natural consequences is they keep engaging in higher levels of risk.
Got it.
Doesn't cost me anything, so I can keep going. I can keep going. I can keep going. If I never skin my knee, I'm going to ride faster. I'm going to ride bigger. Take more chances.
And in some areas, that's just like how we grow, how we stretch. I mean, I remember that as a kid who was constantly chatting too much in school and trying to make jokes.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was something I consciously thought about as like, ooh, that joke landed and I didn't get in trouble. This is my new bar. And then the next one is like, can I get even more laughs and say something even a little goofier? And then I do that, and then I get punished, and I know, oh, I know where my line is.
There's the edge. Yeah,
there's the edge. And so, in some ways, that's very natural. That's like you're learning how far I can go before I fall off the edge.
Yeah. So natural consequences, best, highest level. Second level would be logical consequences, and that is on those occasions when you can decide something that is logically related to whatever the offense was. So a logical association is, you left your bike out. You weren't supposed to, so I'm locking the bike up in the garage for a while. Or, I noticed that you wrote on the wall with pencil here. My mother, who, God bless her, died at age 95, probably told this story about me the last day of her life. Is when I was 3 years old and colored on the walls at our house. And she said, "What did you do there?" And I said, I went round and round and round. And she went and got me a rag and a pail of soapy water and said, "Now you can go round and round and round in the entire room." And so I spent the rest of the afternoon washing all of the walls in that particular room.
What a mom.
A logical consequence, right? Related to the offense. On the positive side, if you have an older kid and they've met curfew every day for a month, you extend their curfew. You know what? You've done a great job of paying attention to this. And so now I'm going to give you an extra half hour.
Right. Yeah. And I see these often. If my kids have been rude to their siblings, there will be a point where, first I separate them, but then there's a point where I'd say, you know what? We actually speak words of life into each other. We don't take away from each other. So what's something good about your brother? And this practice rarely works well for me, by the way. But it does, at times it does make my kids think, okay. And if I hold them to it, they don't want to go through that practice again.
Yeah. So, I'll give you a little guidance on that here in a little bit. That's actually something called positive practice, and we'll get to that. So
excellent.
If logical consequences are available, let them happen, but they often are not. If natural consequences are available, let them happen. If not, if logical consequences can be identified, sure, use them. But that's often also not the case. You can't find a punishment to fit the crime, so to speak. And so the next level, and the one you're likely to use most often, is planned consequences. So we use those when logical or natural are not available. They're not directly related to the offense, but they have the advantage of being flexible. You can use them in any kind of situation. And they also have the advantage of you being able to build in all of the things that we've talked about in terms of creating natural consequence or creating a contrast, plenty of contrast, being able to use it everywhere, and then being able to make sure that you have a complete teaching interaction, meaning at the end of every single one of these, from the kid's first 30-second, 1-minute timeout when they're 2 years old or a year and a half old, all the way to their last grounding the week before they leave your house as an adolescent or a young adult, every single disciplinary interaction, everyone should end the same way, with you saying, "Hey, great job. Thank you so much. And here's your stuff back."
Mm-hmm.
Because you have trained or required a positive, proactive, productive behavior instead of just punishing a negative behavior. You've told them which way to go, not just way to not go.
So, Tim, would you be able to throw a percentage? Like, how often are we able to do natural, logical, or planned consequences? Is it like more than half the time it ends up being planned, or what would be your guess?
I would say more than half the time. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that I could.
And the reason I ask that is I've heard more and more in the last few years from parents just really leaning into natural consequences, to which I agree. But what I've experienced is there's so many things that happen that don't have a natural consequence, and that's frustrating as a parent.
Or the natural consequence is delayed, right? We talked a minute ago about donuts, right? The natural consequence of too many donuts is adding a notch to my belt.
Right.
But that's years later. Smoking is years later, all those kind of things. So, our job as parents is to take what we know about future consequences and bring them into today where our kids live, right? They're not going to be thinking 5 or 10 years ahead. For most kids, the future is 230, not 10 years from now. Natural consequences happen, but whatever the percentage is, they're definitely the exception rather than the rule.
Great. So natural is best. If that kid's riding their bike and you've done what you can to keep them safe and they've got their helmet on but they're still riding recklessly, well, the natural consequences when they wipe out, that hurts and they're going to slow down. We had that. My son Benton, he was doing a good thing, but we had been talking to him, man, when you're going down that hill, you need 2 hands on your bike, 2 hands. And he did a good thing. He went and retrieved a ball for a friend that they left at a park. And now he's flying down the hill and he's holding on to the ball and he hits a little bump and he crashed hard. And that was like half a year ago. And he has never again done that. He is so careful. He'll roll the ball down the hill. If it goes in a gutter or in a drain, it goes in a drain, but he's not wiping out again. So natural, if possible, great. Then logical, then planned. Planned may be the most flexible. I hear some parents be against planned consequences. But Tim, you'd say don't be against it. It's the third option, but you are going to have to use it.
I'd say that's an abdication of responsibility.
Ooh, he just said a big word, abdication, related to the abdominals. No?
Yeah.
Not at all? All right.
We have, you don't have to think about it this way. This is the way I think about it. You have a responsibility as a parent. Your goal is to train your kids to prepare to be successful in adult life. And when we're talking about consequences, we're talking about within the framework of discipline. And when we're talking about what is the function of discipline, it's training. It's the same root word as disciple, right? Your kids are your students in a way. You're trying to teach them important life skills. And teaching happens when you have repeated lessons. And if you miss opportunities to teach, you're missing opportunities to equip your kid for adult life, and here it comes again, abdicating your adult responsibility.
All right. Abdication. That's very good. Reminds me, have you heard about, it's a weird sounding movie. Have you heard of this movie called Constipation?
No.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't come out yet, but it's, yeah. I just got that into the podcast. Owen may edit that out later. We'll find out. I hope it makes it through. Let's launch into consequence history. Are we ready for that?
Yeah, sure.
He's like, what if I put my name on? That's a fair question, Dr. Tim Riley.
It often turns out that even though we're spending a lot of time talking about corrective teaching interactions. The best place to start working on behavior is when your kids are doing well, rather than waiting for them to do something bad, right? So if your kids are used to living in Oz-like territory a lot, and they've got access to lots of privileges, and you are regularly rewarding them, you're positive with them emotionally, you're touching them a lot, you're doing all those kind of things, then great. Then they will notice when all of those things go away. Again, you have all of your stuff or you don't. It's dichotomous. It's, black and white. So if you don't have much stuff, you don't have much attention, you don't have much positive, you don't have much Oz in your life, when that goes away, it's not all that noticeable and there's not that much teaching going on. So if that's the case, then we want to make sure that we're building up the positive side of things to create contrast before we start to get too involved in taking away things. So I have lots of families who are really good at punishment, but there's no other side of the equation.
Right.
And so the kids just get sort of used to being punished and they don't expect anything different. There's not much teaching going on.
And what would you say to the parent who is just not as much of a nurturer, not as cuddly? They're maybe naturally a bit more prickly. And by that, I mean, it's harder for them to give words of affirmation. They're not really one to cuddle or putting their hand on their kid's shoulder is like, this feels forced. How to help them create more Oz-like safe harbor?
Part of what I would wonder is what's going on in their life historically that makes it difficult for them to do that. And so for some people that might be worth exploring. But the other thing I would do would be to point way back to probably maybe the first session that we had, maybe the second. And we talked about walking fast and carrying a clipboard.
Yes.
By which I meant you don't have to know everything to do. You don't have to have a complete grip on everything. You just need to act like you do. So, whether or not it feels good to you or warm and cuddly or whatever to, put your hand on somebody's shoulder or on their hand, the fact is that's a reliable principle of teaching. And in that interaction between parent and child, one of the people is an adult. One of them is not. The person who is the adult would be expected to be able to take actions based on the fact that they believe it's the right thing to do rather than it's a thing that feels good to them. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean you have to have warm, affectionate bear hugs all the time. But, unless you have some kind of, sensory reactivity or something,
right,
you ought to be able to put your hand on your kid's shoulder, touch them 10 or 20 or 50 times a day. You ought to be able to come up with something positive to say about what they're doing, even if they're not doing very much. You did a great job getting your left foot in front of your right foot, whatever. Okay? If you don't do that, if you don't create the most Oz-like environment that you can within whatever limits you have, then you're not going to have effective discipline because the kid doesn't have anything to lose.
Right. Yeah. There is no contrast.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep
so,
going.
In those families that do well with the positive stuff, discipline's pretty straightforward, the procedures for it. But some families don't do that much to recognize. And again, those are things that you can work on. I mentioned touch. It's particularly important with little kids.
Yeah, you said 10, 20, 50 times. Is there a
50,
target?
60 times a day.
And what constitutes a good touch?
Hand on the shoulder, top of the head, basically anything. I mean, anytime you can get skin to skin touch, there's actually some chemical events that happen when you get skin to skin touch it's reinforcing. 50 times a day is a reasonable target. And it doesn't mean you have to interrupt whatever the kid's doing, right? It's just you walk by, and if they're behaving appropriately, then it's just a little touch on their shoulder, a little touch on their arm, walking by, that essentially carries the message, I see what you're doing and I approve of it.
Wow.
If you touch your kid and they flinch, you're probably not doing it enough.
Ooh. I flinched a lot when I was a kid. So I'm going to say that my mom probably didn't give enough positive touch. More, I'm blaming things on my
too
parents
busy dusting
now. And we had to dust.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I was pretty much an orphan with two parents. I had to do all the work. Woe is me. None of this is true, by the way. I did do a lot of work, but it was healthy for me. I love you, Mom. If you're listening to this, there's a low percentage. You're great. No, you're great is high percentage. Low percentage. You're listening. All right, moving on.
Okay. You weren't a math major, were you?
I was decent at math, actually. It was reading that I struggled with.
So touch is a big deal, especially for younger kids, but don't give up on it with your older kids either. I mean, even
Right.
adolescents. I mean, don't give up on that idea that human connection is powerful in ways we don't have to talk about here. The other is praise, right? Positive statements. And it don't need to be about big things. Don't wait for big things to happen. Affirm smaller things, right? Praise is free. It's unlimited, doesn't cost you anything. It's portable. There is no reason in the world to be stingy with praise. And I actually put a little quote in here that I got from a book in the, like industrial organizational psychology. It's like how to improve performance in the workplace. And so this is a quote. The guy says, saying thank you and you're welcome is bedrock communication. In my experience, if someone says thank you often enough, it's pretty hard not to say you're welcome. If the object were to say thank you as often as possible, it seemed we should design a way of saying thank you to employees who did day in, day out what they were supposed to do. Thank you for coming to work. Thank you for not being late, right? If what we want is productive, routine, taking care of responsibility from our kids, then that's what we ought to be rewarding, not just expecting, oh, they'll do it because it's required. If I go to work, I expect to get paid. I'm like a plumber. If I'm not working, I don't get paid. But if I do go to work, I get paid. And I don't expect to have to do anything extraordinary to do that. If I just show up and take care of business, then I expect that I'm going to get paid. If I do something extra or something extraordinary, I expect to get paid more. So I think rewarding routine, productive, appropriate behavior, all of the things that we outlined on the list of expectations, we ought to be all over that. Because if you do that, other things happen. Better things happen. That's the place that you build from. And if you take care of routine responsibilities, then you're not stuck trying to manage that stuff going forward. You have more time, more effort, more energy available to do bigger and better things.
Excellent. Would you say there's a difference between, I've read before that praise and encouragement, and it all depends on how they define it. But in that context, praise was defined as like little things like a thank you or great job or I appreciate you, whereas encouragement was specific. When you scrub the dishes so well, like I was able just to put them away, and it gives the person a specific thing to hold on to. Oh, he liked that I scrubbed the dishes well. From this context, is that like it's harder to give encouragement because you're specific. The book that I was reading, it was like praise just doesn't have as much value as encouragement. But what I'm hearing from you is praise still has value.
Well, I mean, probably into semantics here to a certain extent. I mean, it's possible how we're going to define it. Yeah. I mean, when I talk about praise, I'm talking about, as I said in that little quote there, it's like, thanks for doing this thing. Right. So as you're describing it, that's encouragement.
Yeah. Got him.
Right. So I'm connecting those two events. I mean, I would think of encouragement as being more general and you can do this, kind of things, trying to urge somebody forward to more as opposed to congratulating them for a job well done.
Got it. So that was probably just more so the way that author approached that book so they could sell more books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for them. I like it. Very good.
So one of the other things, and this is surprisingly hard for people to do for some reason, is to respond to acceptable behavior, not just exceptional behavior. Don't wait until something extraordinary happens. Reward things that you like, whatever those things are, right? You're trying to build a positive environment. You're also, to be sort of, here's another word, Machiavellian about it.
Gosh, he says all these words. Machiavellian. So when you mock someone who's a villain.
That.
No?
So to be kind of mercenary about it, how about that? You're setting up more effective discipline by adding more positives, right? Because you're creating more potential consequence. But there's also momentum that develops out of doing that, right?
Absolutely.
You're creating a culture, but you're also setting yourself up as the parent as, I am the giver of good things here. And that's where you want to be. You don't want your kids to be worried when you walk into the room that you're going to just unload on them in some way.
Right. Yeah, I saw this just the other day. Giving the kids, I gave them broccoli and green beans at the same meal.
Ooh,
this is a risk. Major risk. But as they got going, I'd be like, well, look at you, Jada, getting after those green beans. Nice. And then like Ben and Remy were like, oh, we better get after these green beans. So then they started. I was like, look at everybody's eating the green beans, but who's getting after the broccoli? Oh, Remy's got some broccoli. And it was just like by keeping it constantly positive, like all three of them almost ate all of them. Like one kid didn't finish the green beans. Yeah. But I was really impressed. The bar was low. And had we said nothing about her, just like, you need to do this, I don't think they would have eaten as many.
That's third-party praise is the way we'd refer to that, right? So, it's just a fact, undeniable in my opinion. You get more behavior out of positive results.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, we work to avoid starving, but we work for satisfaction. We work for money. We work for things we want. We're always going to be moving forward. So the more positive you can stay, the better. And not only for that particular instance, but also on those occasions then when you need to be negative, it's more powerful.
All right. So in your book, you say beware the no bias. What does that even mean?
So I used to work at a place called Monroe Meyer Institute for Genetics and Rehabilitation at the University Medical Center.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, I don't work there anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For a variety of reasons. But there was a guy I worked for, and I'll withhold his actual name, but I referred to him as Dr. No. Because, I was in there trying to build programs, and I was trying to build up this outreach rural behavioral health program. And so, I ran the numbers, and I knew it would work. And I knew if I got some students in there and we could build, we could be self-supporting plus. And I put all of the numbers together, and I went into his office and laid out this spreadsheet and presented it to him. And he said, no. And I couldn't think of a single reason why that should be the answer. So I allowed a little time to pass, and then I came back and I presented it again, and it turned into maybe. And I came back and I presented it again, and he signed off on it, and we got to do it. But his bias was in the direction of no. And I learned how to work around it. I learned that, okay, first time's always no. Second time, I'm going to have some room. Third time, we're actually going to have a discussion. A lot of parents will reflexively say no to their kids, right? Hey, can I go? No. And then the discussion starts. And, one of several things might happen. The kid bullies the parents into giving in to them later, or demonstrates to them that they were unreasonable to begin with, and so on and so on. The parent gets mad at themselves for giving in, and they dig their heels in even further, whatever. So, this maybe is not it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough that I've noticed it. And so that's especially true if you haven't communicated your expectations clearly, then they don't know. And you say no. So long story short, I always think it's best to have a yes bias, that if your kid asks you if they can do something, your initial response is yes. If.
Oh, okay. Yes.
If. Are your chores done? Have you followed the rules today? Have you met your requirements for today?
Yes.
And then if that's true, then yes.
And that's really not, I mean, it's a different result, but you could also approach that, no, you have not done this, this, and this yet today.
Right.
But this keeps it positive. Yes, if you've done these. And then the kid has a better chance of being like, well, I need to go finish that.
Yeah. And that's a really good observation, because now the responsibility is back on the kid.
Right.
And it's like, well, this is really not my parent controlling this. I'm in control of this because I didn't do what I was expected to do.
I love that. I'm going to be able to use that today. Yes, if. That's great.
So, I mean, you want your kids to have privileges, right? You don't want them to live this Spartan life.
You don't want it to be a constant fight.
You just don't want them to have that without earning it in some way.
Correct. So the yes, if puts it back on the kids. It helps reward them. So that gets us into rewards and privileges. We've been talking about natural, logical, planned consequences. We talked about consequence history. And then we got into the no bias, which I do see with kids. I do see with adults. And I think as a parent, I get exhausted.
Yeah, if you've got a kid who asks for a lot, they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then eventually you cave. And essentially what you're doing is teaching them to be persistent enough or obnoxious enough that eventually you'll give in, as opposed to being clear about what you wanted in the first place, and then putting the responsibility back on them to say, yeah, of course you can, if this.
That's wonderful. You know what? I think this is a good spot to put a pin in it for today. And I'd love for you to try this tool today. Learning what we've learned, keeping it positive with your kid. When your kid comes up and asks you, can I do this? Your natural inclination may be to say no, but instead say yes, if you've accomplished these other things I've asked you by that certain time or whatever it was earlier in the day. There's a speaker who says kind of a same idea, but a business principle. They said before saying how, because you work in a job and someone comes up to you like Dr. Tim came up to his boss, said, I think we ought to present this. He presents him the whole plan. Our natural inclination is to be like, how are we going to do that? Look at all the details, yada, yada, yada. This guy he said, before saying how, say wow. And it's kind of cheesy, but it gives you a second to just sit back and be like, wow, that's a really great idea. And when you start there, when you start positive, you're more inclined to like want to see that happen for you and for them. And we want our kids to have positive privileges. We want them to have success and be joyful. Yes, if. So that's a great way to put a plug in it for this episode. Dr. Tim, any other words of wisdom from you on this one?
No.
Wow. We got him. Any other characters from The Wizard of Oz that you are fond of?
Yeah, I kind of like Toto. Yeah,
Toto the dog.
Yeah.
I like those. I feel like those flying monkeys were misunderstood.
Monkeys,
yeah.
And the guards, the yo.
Those guys too. They were
those guys.
Yeah, I thought they were saying Oreo. Yeah. Like my whole childhood, I thought they were saying Oreo. I'd always get hungry during that part of the movie. They're very misunderstood.
Yeah,
I like to see.
They're doing their job. It's all just following orders.
I like to see the sequel on the guards and the flying monkeys. They're doing a lot of positive. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Have a great day. Keep parenting well.